Welcome to Closing Arguments presented on Lee Pitts Live. I'm Attorney Joe North, and this is Attorney Joseph North.
Thank you. Good to be here. The first thing we're going to talk about in this segment is negligent security. And I know that a lot of times when you think about being the victim of a violent crime or know someone who has been, our first instinct is to think about criminal law. But really, it's broader than criminal law, and there's a civil side to it as well. And so, whereas criminal law is about who committed the crime, civil law negligent security is about where the crime was committed. And so, Dad, do you want to talk a little bit about negligent security as a concept and what premises liability really means?
Yes, thank you. So, and a lot of people don't know this, so I'm glad that we're sharing this with the 239. Negligent security cases really involve claims or lawsuits against the property owners. And I'm talking about commercial properties like apartment complexes, nightclubs, commercial properties. Those property owners have a legal duty to keep people safe on their properties. And what we see a lot of times is there may be either an apartment complex or a nightclub that has had a history of crime happening at that location. But then they don't do anything about it. They don't put in security guards. They don't put in surveillance cameras or have proper lighting. And when another incident happens because of prior crime happening there before, then they're responsible because they did not have reasonable security measures in place in light of foreseeable crime happening. And then that's when people who've been the victims of either assault, battery, sexual abuse, shootings, any type of crime against the person, they call us to get justice.
And as you mentioned, a lot of times it involves commercial properties. And it applies as long as the person who's the victim was legally on the premises. And so that means whether you're talking about a shopping mall, an apartment complex, even a sporting event. And when I say legally on the premises, if you're at the shopping mall with your friend and you haven't bought a single thing you don't intend to, you're just hanging out, and something happens to you, God forbid, you have a claim for negligent security, even though you weren't an active shopper.
That is absolutely correct. And let's take that over to an apartment complex. So say someone does not live at the ABC apartment complex, but they're visiting a relative or visiting a friend, and God forbid something happens to them. Even though they're not a tenant or a resident at that property, because they're invited onto the premises, they have a claim if something happens to them on that property. So yes, you're absolutely correct.
Right, because they're legally on the premises. And then as you mentioned, the duty that these properties have is to provide reasonable security. And so depending on the property, they might need one security guard. They might need 10. They might need better lighting in the parking lot or by the entrance and things of that nature. So it depends on the property. And part of what we do with our team is we investigate the property to see what sort of past crimes they've had. And so we pull records from the public record department. We have independent investigators as far as who assess the property and what security measures could help.
Yes, and you made a very good point. Sometimes there are security measures in place, but it's not enough. And the case that comes to mind is the case that we just tried out in Clewiston, where at this apartment complex, they actually had an armed police officer on the property. But this property was so bad, they needed more than one armed police officer. And we were able to establish that through evidence and our expert witness, and we were successful in getting compensation for our clients, even though they had an armed police officer on the property.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Depends on the property. And with that property, because there was so much crime going on, what happens is if the security that a property has isn't working, then they're liable if crime continues to happen. And one of the interesting aspects of negligent security cases is that, of course, there's justice for the person who was actually the victim of the crime and suffered the injuries most directly. But there's also a broader social justice as well, because by bringing these negligent security cases, it incentivizes these properties to make sure that their security is adequate in light of Florida law, because they know that if they don't do what they're supposed to do as far as providing security, not only will additional crimes happen, but they will eventually be held liable themselves.
That's right. So what these cases will do is not only compensate our clients, but we'll make that property do better so that it doesn't happen to somebody else. And that's the long-term justice in these cases.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I always say, you know, there are a lot of types of trauma. We have car accidents, we have slip and falls, sports injuries, but there is no trauma like a gunshot trauma. It affects a person physically and mentally, and not just that person, but that person's entire family. So that's why these cases are so important that we get justice for our clients, because this is just the worst type of trauma that someone can suffer.
Right, and it's unfortunate, and I think it's important to note as well that while a person who lived but was the victim of assault and battery, or even worse, a gunshot, has a claim, if a family member is actually passed as a result of a fatal assault and battery or a fatal gunshot, the family has a claim on their behalf.
That's right. We call that the wrongful death lawsuit.
Right.
So you're absolutely correct.
Exactly. And again, that's why at the end of the day, with negligent security cases, it's about justice, whether it's for the person themselves who was actually injured, the family of someone who might be deceased as a result of being the victim of a violent crime, or the community at large that the property is in, to make sure that not just that property, but all surrounding properties are providing reasonable security measures.
You're absolutely correct. And that is our closing argument for today. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for our next segment regarding hurricane property damage claims. Again, closing arguments presented to you on Lee Pitts Live. Have you or someone you know been injured in an apartment complex on someone else's property because there was not enough security? No security guards, no surveillance cameras. I'm attorney Joe North.
And I'm attorney Joseph North. At the North Law Firm, our family will fight for you because your personal injury case is personal to us. Call us at the North Law Firm, where our priority is getting you the compensation you deserve, and you pay nothing unless we recover for you.